Hey YouTubers, Phantom on a Budget here. It is July 2015, which means that I have been gone a long time. As you can see, I'm wearing a set of my do-it-yourself Phantom of the Opera prosthetics, and what I thought I'd do today, because I'm gearing up for Phantom Con, which is a thing, and you should totally go, I thought I'd practice, because I'm about 3 years out of practice, and I need to knock the rest off. So, stay tuned, because what I'm going to show you is how to cast gelatin and liquid latex appliances in the very simple mold that I talked about making back in 2011 in the do-it-yourself Phantom of the Opera prosthetic video, where I talked about how to make the mold, but I never told you how to use it, so it's my bad. But keep watching, because I'm going to show you how not just to pull the appliances, but also how to apply them. We're going to talk about the edges as well. Edges are very important in your makeup. And do a little... Hey, I have a decent camera. Finally. So here you go. So these are all made by me. This is actually 4 different appliances on my face. I've got the cheek piece, I've got nose piece, lower lip, and the old standby of the forehead still crater thing. So, if you have any questions, as always, about Phantom makeup, costuming, hair and wigs, or just general shenanigans, just please shoot me an email. There you go, at phantomonabudget.com. This is a very handy banner, which I did not have made for this video. It's for Phantom Con, just so I wasn't completely pathetic, but it is kind of handy there in the background. So, and again, that's my website, phantomonabudget.com. Lots of tutorials there for different types of Phantom makeup, wigs, Phantom costuming resources, links, and wonderful, wonderful goodies that you should probably check out. So, go there, click the link. It's on the description of this video. And I will talk to you soon, so enjoy the step-by-step prosthetic videos and everything else that's coming to you this summer. If you're in the Richmond, Virginia area, on August 8th and 9th, please stop into Phantom Con. It's a Phantom of the Opera convention, and you should totally come. You should totally come. Come to Phantom Con. And I'm going to be producing, not producing, but I'm going to be hosting a makeup workshop, a couple of makeup workshops, and some costuming panels. So, very excited. It's going to be a good time, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you there. Alright, take care. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go through this with a Q-tip and just make sure that all the old latex that has been in there for the last couple of years is cleaned out so that there's no debris or anything getting in the way. And I'm paying particular attention to the edges here because, again, the edges need to be as clean and as thin as possible, so I want to make sure that there's nothing in the way. As you see, I'm pulling off little bits of old latex here, so just to make sure that doesn't get in the way of making a very thin and very clean edge. Just make sure everything is clean and ready to go. So once I've made sure that the mold is good to go and it's clean and it's ready, for the gelatin version of the prosthetic, what I'm going to do is take the old bottles of gelatin that I had, the giant, hard to work with bottles. I cut the bottle up and I cut the gelatin into much smaller bits and cubes, and these melt a lot faster and they're a lot easier to work with. So what I've done is taken 4, I'm going to put that in the microwave in a microwave safe bowl, microwave it for about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to put it into this mold, and hopefully that will go well. It's been a few years since I've done this, so pray for me, but that's the plan, and we're going to see how that goes. Okay, so the gelatin is melted, and here it goes into the mold. I'm trying to get this out as fast as I possibly can, because I know the gelatin starts setting. I don't want it to cool before I've got it where I need it in the mold. And it's already kind of starting to set up on me here. But what I'm going to try to do while it's still warm is work the edges a little bit. Again, I want these as thin as I can possibly make them. It's a little bit hard. I probably should have had a different tool for this. And not a cotton tip, but oh well, that's fine. We'll make it work. Cut that off. And again, gelatin sets really quickly, so you have to work as fast as you can. But kind of the nice thing about gelatin is that once it cools, if you don't like what you have, you can pull it back up, microwave it again, and try again. So if you're like me and you haven't done this in like 3 years, and you're not happy with how it looks, you just wait until it's cool, rip it out, put it back in the bowl, and try again. But actually it doesn't look too bad. We got some bubbles in here. I'm going to try to pop and get them. The inside of the prosthetic here I'm not too worried about because it's still, gelatin's still warm, it's still kind of setting up. I was more concerned with the outside of it, and this is getting all over me. There we go. Okay. Now all I have to do is just wait for that to go and cool down, and we will pull it out and powder it first and see what we have. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes since I put the gelatin in the mold, and as you can see I did the same thing for the forehead piece, and this one is still setting up. It's going to take a little while because it's a little bit deeper and there's more gelatin in there, so I'm going to give it time. But when you're ready to pull the prosthetic out of the mold, what you really want to be careful to do is to powder it before you remove it. And I left my brush on the other side of the table, so I will go get that and come back. Here we go. Okay. That would be a blooper, but forget it. So if you have a brush, I suggest using it. A powder puff can work too, or even a sponge. But what the powder is going to do is just make sure that the prosthetic doesn't stick to itself. And it doesn't matter if it's gelatin or latex. Bottom line, it's always going to try to stick to itself, and you want to avoid that as much as possible, especially when you pull it out of the mold, because again, the integrity of the edges is incredibly important. You want them as thin as possible, and you don't want to screw that up when you go to roll it back and remove it and have it stick to itself, and it destroys your edge. And once you do that and you wreck your edge, you're kind of out of luck. So I'm just going to brush off the extra powder here. And we should be good to go. I've got the TV playing in the background, and I totally forgot to turn that off. So hopefully it won't be too loud. Alright, so there we go. There we have the prosthetic in the mold. It feels like it's good to go. So I'm just going to prepare a little bit of powder on the end of my brush here, and I'm going to peel up an edge very carefully, and I'm going to have some powder down in there. Yeah, TV's a little bit too loud. And mute button. Alright, here we go. Try this again. You probably can't see it, but what I'm doing is, as I'm working up the edge, I am powdering the inside, which would now be the outside of the prosthetic, as I go, so that as I pull it up, there's already powder right there, and again, I won't have to worry about it trying to stick to itself. And something I've kind of noticed in playing a little bit with the gelatin, because I haven't played as much with the gelatin as I have with the latex, is that the edges are a little bit more difficult, and this can be a little bit tougher to pull it out than the latex can be. But the nice thing about gelatin is you can actually blend your edge and dissolve your edge. You can use witch hazel or acetone to dissolve the edge into your skin after you apply the prosthetic. So this is what I'm going to do with the gelatin here. I'm just going to work on pulling this up very slowly. I'm going to shove powder under there as I go so that it's ready, you know, it's not going to stick to itself. And then once it's done, I'm going to brush all the extra powder off, and then I'll show you that product. So here is the prosthetic out of the mold. It actually, I think it looks pretty good, and we did have a little bit of tear there, so what I can go through and do later if I want to is heat this metal tool up and press it here, or heat just a little bit of gelatin up and just patch that right there. But that's what happens if you try to pull too hard, and you know, you can actually rip the appliance as you remove it from the mold, so be careful not to do that. But you can see it's covered in powder, so nothing is sticking on itself. The edges came out pretty well. Because this is basically a one-piece mold, and I forgot to make a delineation here, a separation between the upper part of the lip, which is right here, and the bottom part of the lip, which is a separate appliance that I like to have. They kind of ran together, so I had to go and cut them with some scissors, so that's why there's a very straight line right there, which you always want to avoid with prosthetics. The edges you don't want straight, you don't want really obvious, like you can tell right there, because our eyes are really drawn toward straight lines. So because we want to make that edge disappear against the skin, we want something a little bit more like this, or even better yet over here, where it's very irregular, very thin. It blends in much better to the skin and camouflages it. And that's why, you know, camouflage patterns don't use straight lines, because again, whether you know this or not, like we tend to just look for straight lines and we see them right away. So, but again, because this is gelatin, what I can do later, if I decide to use this, I don't know if I will or not, but with gelatin it's nice. Again, I can go through with a little bit of witch hazel, which you can pick up at your drugstore, or acetone, or even rubbing alcohol, and just using the Q-tip, just dip that in the witch hazel or whatever solvent I'm using, and blend that into my skin. So that's kind of the nice thing about gelatin. Yes, you want thin and irregular edges, but if you run into a situation where maybe it didn't come out the way that you wanted to, you can blend it a little bit better. That's not the case with liquid latex. Liquid latex, you have to be a lot more careful because you can't dissolve the edge like you can with gelatin. So, but that is the cheek prosthetic. This part goes on the nose. This is the upper lip. This is the cheek that runs up under the eye, and then the lower part of the cheek. What I usually do when I use this mold, which is the one that I made in the 2011 video, I think, the do-it-yourself phantom prosthetic mold, I actually get 3 separate prosthetics out of this mold. So the nose part, when I do it in latex, I will do it by itself, and then this cheek section, and then the lower lip goes by itself. So this whole cheek area is actually 3 separate prosthetics, but because this is basically a demo for the gelatin, here you are in mainly 2 pieces, and it pulled out as 1 piece. And with the mold, when you're demolding anything, especially if you're using gelatin, again, you saw here, oh, there's a pull, there's a tear, and that's because I wasn't paying very much attention, and I pulled too hard on a very thin part of the prosthetic, and it ripped. So with gelatin, that is a big risk. So again, make sure it's totally cool, because if you have a very deep appliance like this is, you see there's a lot of volume there. The gelatin in the middle can still be warm and can still be too soft to pull out, and so you want to make sure the entire thing is cool and ready to go. But again, this is gelatin. It's a very lifelike material, and it's great to use on prosthetics. It's inexpensive as makeup goes, and to get that really lifelike feel, I think it's a great material, especially for the beginner. Again, because the nice thing about this, if I didn't like this, if I had ripped this in half, pulling it out because I'm out of practice, I could have just said, oh well, and tossed it right back in the bowl here, and microwaved it again, and just tried again. So that's kind of the neat thing about about gelatin is it's very beginner friendly in that way. Unlike latex, which once it's set, it is what it is. Okay, I thought I'd show you just the demolding process for the gelatin real quick, because this one's actually working a little bit better than the other one. It's a little less complicated because it's circular and not as deep. But basically this is what I'm doing. I've got my white setting powder, or it's actually clear, but whatever. And I've got it on the inside of the mold here, which is actually the outside of the appliance. And as I'm pulling it very gently, I'm helping the edges along here, and making sure the powder gets in there as I go. So that way I don't have to worry about anything sticking on itself, because it's already powdered. So this is the full set of Phantom Prosthetics pulled in gelatin. So just so you guys can have a look at it. Here's the forehead piece. I put quite a lot of gelatin in here, probably more than I, maybe should have. But also this is going to give it a lot of depth too. So here you go. Take a look at that. This is something I sculpted, oh god, like 7 years ago. And has been a pretty good piece for me. So I actually like how it turned out in gelatin. Looks pretty cool. I like that a lot. And then the cheek and nose and forehead, or mouth piece that we had already talked about. So there you go. That's a whole set of Phantom do-it-yourself prosthetics in gelatin. I think they look really awesome. And again, if you're not sure how to make the mold, this is one of the molds, check out my how to do-it-yourself Phantom prosthetic mold making tutorial that I talked about. I guess it was back in 2011. It's been a while. But that's what they look like, and what I'm going to do now is clean out both these molds again, and I'm going to pull the same prosthetics, this time with liquid latex and cotton, and I'm going to use the cotton to create the depth that you see here. That's all gelatin in this particular set. So stay tuned. Okay, so now I'm going to do basically the same thing, just with liquid latex, and so this is the classic material that I use to spend them on a budget. You can find it, again, just about at any party store, any type of Halloween store, that time of year. It's a relatively easy material to use, and I like it in this mold for any time that I want to be in the makeup for a long time. And again, because the gelatin tends to be heat sensitive, I don't want it getting soft if I'm going to be in a hot environment. So that's where the liquid latex comes in handy. I think it wears a little bit better. The gelatin I think is more realistic, but because we're working with very basic techniques and very basic materials, unfortunately, there's no one perfect answer. So in this case, what I do, instead of pouring it all in at once with the liquid latex, I like to take it on a makeup wedge, dip it in this latex, which I have a giant tub of liquid latex from FX Supply, and it's non-ammonia latex, so it's a little bit easier to deal with, and because it's non-ammonia, it doesn't shrink as much, so that's why I like it. For these molds and making basic prosthetics out of it is because the shrinkage is much less than it would be with a lower quality latex. So what I do with a makeup wedge is just go through and I lay down a base layer, and what I like to pay attention to here is feathering out the edges on the outside. Again, because we want them thin as possible and irregular, so I'm just going to go through and kind of just pat down a thin layer of liquid latex. And what I'm going to try to do is leave the lip area here alone, and I will go back and fill that in with a lip prosthetic after this one is done and pulled. But I'm going to, again, feather out these edges as best I can. It gets a little tricky here by the lips, so I take it on the edge of the makeup wedge and just kind of feather it down. But this is just the base layer. And what I'm going to do in a minute after I get everything painted in and covered, and it's a little tricky here because again this mold is really deep. which is great for the depth I want to create. It's just tricky kind of getting that first layer or two in here. You can also use a paintbrush, preferably one that you don't have any emotional attachment to because you're not going to be able to use it again. Again, latex doesn't come off of hair, it bonds to hair. So if you use a paintbrush, please make sure it's a disposable one. Or you can use one of those makeup, or not makeup, but the sponge paintbrushes work out well too. Because unlike gelatin, I can't dissolve the edge on a latex appliance. So I have to make sure that I make the edges as thin as I can possibly get them. And I don't go slapping a bunch of latex on because that's not going to end well. And I'll be stuck trying to mask it later, which it's not very easy to do if you have a latex prosthetic with a bad edge. It's very difficult to make it blend into your skin. Okay, so I have 2 base layers of latex in the mold. It's a little bit thicker toward the deeper part of the mold, and that is because I need it to contain the cotton that I'm going to throw in there. And I use cotton here because it gives me depth in this mold, and again you can see how deep this mold is, and you saw it on the gelatin prosthetic as well. I want depth and I want that dimension, but I really don't want weight. I like to avoid having a lot of weight in the prosthetic. I mean, I like how the gelatin ones turned out, but I'll be perfectly honest, they feel pretty heavy compared to the latex and cotton version. So what I do here is after I have that base layer of latex, I just go through and I lay down some cotton, and note how I have the cotton kind of pulled apart like this. You don't just take an entire cotton ball and shove it in there, that looks pretty crappy. So just take it in just little pieces. A little goes a long, long way, trust me. And I just make sure the cotton covers all of these deeper parts of the mold so that when I go through, I'll cover them with more latex and I will seal the cotton in. And what that's going to do is, again, give me that depth and that dimension without a lot of weight. It's going to be a really light prosthetic, which is great because it's more comfortable to wear when it's lighter. And in my opinion, I think it moves really well too. When I was playing with this a couple years ago, when I first did this mold, I was very happy with how it turned out. I thought it was kind of soft to the touch because I don't have a lot of latex on the outside, just enough to cover. And then the cotton is right underneath a couple of very thin layers of latex, so it was kind of more realistic to the touch than I thought it might be, which is nice. And then it's very flexible and very easy to wear. So that's why, as much as I love the gelatin, I think gelatin is really cool. I think for this particular prosthetic, I actually prefer the latex and the cotton method. And I way prefer this to doing it on my face like I've done for so many years. And I did like 2 tutorials of the exact same thing, so I apologize. That was really messy. What I went through and did right there is just, again, cover all the cotton that's stuffed into the deeper parts of the mold with the latex, and that's going to seal it in. And there's I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually a pretty good amount of latex on there. So basically this is done, and I'm going to let this dry overnight because it's pretty late right now. And in the morning what I'll do is I'll pull this out, and I'll do the nose area prosthetic, which is right up here, separately, because I end up applying that separately, and the lower lip prosthetic, same thing, will go here, and I'll probably do those 2 at the same time because there's a gap there I can separate out. But that's pretty much it. That's how you do the liquid latex on the cotton. Alright, so I've pulled the latex and cotton prosthetic out of the cheek mold, and that's what it looks like. Great definition, as you can see, and the depth is fantastic. And it's very light, pretty flexible, and again, this is just something that I prefer to wear if I'm going to be in the makeup for a long time. So I thought maybe I would do the Gelatin prosthetics this time out this weekend, but because I'm going to be using the latex and the cotton prosthetic for Phantom Con next month, I decided I should probably just go ahead and practice and get my groove back with the latex appliance. And here is the forehead piece in the mold, and what I talked about yesterday with the non-ammonia latex not shrinking as much. Latex, again, will shrink. The liquid latex, when you put it in a slush mold like this and you leave it to dry, if you leave it long enough, it does contract some. So I like the non-ammonia latex because it contracts less, and it's just, in general, it's a much higher quality product than what you would get at just any old Halloween store. But you can see I haven't done anything with this mold yet, but I'm touching it and it's already pulled up from the bottom, which is fine because it's going to make my life a lot easier when I go to demold it. So, same thing, I'm going to just put some powder on the top of it. Make sure my brush fell apart, so I will just go ahead and take the business end of it here. And I'm just going to spread the powder all over the inside of the appliance just to make sure that nothing sticks on itself when I go to pull it up. And I did leave this overnight, so it has sat for about 9 hours. And you see that's how much it can contract in just 9 hours. Although, to be fair, this mold has been used multiple times in just the last day or so, so there was some residual powder that I thought I got all of it out, but probably didn't, which is fine because the latex won't stick to the powder, so it pulled up by itself, which I'm okay with. And then you just pick up an edge and dab some powder on my brush, drop it in there, and just start working. Pulling up the edges very carefully as I go. And you see how easy that can come out of the mold. It comes out a lot easier than the gelatin one did. Because it's coming up a little too easy, I'm just going to make sure everything is coated with powder. But this is looking really, really good. And it really doesn't matter what material you use as long as you understand the ups and downs of each, the pros and cons of each. For me, again, because when I do appearances like Phantom Con, which is coming up, I have a panel and a workshop on one day, and then I have to judge a costume competition the following day. Well, actually, no, that night. So I'm going to be in makeup and costume pretty much from 10 or 11 in the morning until probably 11 at night. So it's a pretty solid 12 hours. So for me, again, the latex just works better. It lasts longer. It wears better. But that is the forehead prosthetic out of the mold. You can see nothing is sticking to itself, and I love the edges on this one because they're super thin and they will be very easy to blend in. So I am stoked. And anytime you have a little extra material like here, this is a little bit of a flashing, so what I can do is just kind of cut that away, and it's still thin enough right here that I can blend that in. So what I'll demonstrate in the application is blending the edge in of a latex prosthetic using Prosade instead of more latex or just using makeup, because the Prosade is actually super effective for that. So that's the demolding of the liquid latex. And as you see here, I've got the nose prosthetic and the lip appliance drying in the mold right now. So there's going to be probably another hour. So what I'm going to do is get these pre-painted. These two pre-paint. Those won't take very long to paint. I'm going to put the rest of the stuff away and get back to you when I'm ready to put the stuff on.